everybody. Welcome to episode 17 of the State of Social podcast. Today, we are going to get into two topics. One is going to be a little bit more, tactical, something we've been seeing in the field with boots on the ground and that we want to talk about and see if you've been seeing it too. And then the second one's going to kind of be more of a feel-good segment, kind of like a little bit of a just like fun little chat for us social media managers. So first, let's get into our topic number one. TikTok's growth rate. We have seen, for our own clients and ourselves, honestly, a rapid, I wouldn't say a decline in growth, but a challenge to grow easier than we could in years previously, specifically years 2021, 2022. And it's not just us. We found an article that kind of from Business Insider that kind of says just this, how other creators are experiencing kind of a slow collapse in growth rate or fast collapse in growth rate on TikTok, but a very slow growth rate. And I can't help but attest that to just like it being older now. It's not a new app anymore. It's kind of lost its excitement around there, and we have a lot of like users are used to their behavior and creators there. But I kind of want to get everybody's thoughts on why they think this is, and then we can kind of dive into a little bit about what the article says. Any thoughts there?
I honestly, there's a few thoughts, but something that I've been just hearing overall is content creators are struggling to entertain the audience and their audiences because like everything has kind of already been done, is what they were saying in this one podcast that I was listening to, specifically all content creators. And not to go too in the weeds here, but they were saying that they had seen such like a slow in growth. Like they have not been able to grow on TikTok or Instagram. But they were saying like it makes me like I don't even know what to do to make people happy. Like I'm at this standstill. And it's definitely discouraging when you're creating content and you're not getting a lot of followers like we had in the past, like you had mentioned.
Yeah. Something I was thinking about recently was I wonder if all the hullabaloo right now around the TikTok ban, because okay, so also we can touch on that too, because a lot has happened since our last episode and this episode, and by that I mean it just hasn't gone away. But the talk of the TikTok ban and what will happen there, ultimately it's probably not going to get banned. At the end of the day, if this all goes through and that they have to sell, I'm sure a gaggle of very rich people will get together and put their money together. And I know. We can if you want. This is the place to do it.
I'm not in the business of making enemies.
I know. So yeah, I'm sure people will come together and buy TikTok. In fact, I can guarantee that's what's going to happen. Which will be its own, like, are we going to see the platform behaving differently if and when it gets bought by an American-owned company? Censorship is a real other conversation there, which honestly could be our next podcast topic. But that's not what we're talking about today. Yeah. I'm just saying that to say I wonder if that will push people back on the app or be like, oh, wait, no, don't ban it. I forgot I love this. And then like kind of remind people of the thing they used to consume more of. But to the point of creators not like feeling like it's all out there already and like not knowing, that's such an interesting perspective, because as somebody who is on the app, but maybe a little too much for my own good, I feel like I'm always served content that I didn't even know. I was like, oh, this is cool. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, this is my new favorite thing. Now I'm going to come to this. Like right now, my new favorite thing is this guitarist that just shoots towards the sky. So it's always the sky and you see a little bit of his guitar and then he just plays it and he puts the lyrics on the screen so you can sing karaoke to the songs that he plays. And it's like, oh, what a fun little niche. And so I feel like it's limitless. So that's wild that creators, that's a very normal feeling. I feel like as a creator, I feel that way, but I feel like that can't be it. That cannot be the only reason, but that's very interesting to hear.
I think the reasoning behind that is that a lot of them got started for like being popular for one thing. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, oh my God, Spensois. Like he got popular for his screaming, and Drew Afawalo making fun of men. And I think they all a lot of people found themselves stuck in this like specific niche. And I think that the trouble lies in trying to escape that and finding like other types of content and topics and just overall vibe that also resonates. So
I think the other thing that because we know this is true because I just like earthquaked my whole laptop. So we know this is true based on platforms that have been around a lot longer, like Instagram, for example, that we know growth is harder over time when there is a larger mass of users on a platform. Like by the time the platform has reached maturity in terms of users on both the average user viewer side and viewer content creator side, like folks who are actually making content, we know that it's harder to grow because essentially it's a more saturated space, right? So like if you, and this is where I think we're at with TikTok at the moment. TikTok also, we talked about this during TikTok's growth, and it's really important not to lose sight of. There was outsized growth on TikTok because it was like the perfect storm of a story in terms of an app, not even app, social space launching. It was perfectly timed that it was growing in popularity right before we all got locked down and put in our houses. And it was a fantastic method of escapism and creativity, particularly because, and I think like a rebuttal is like, well, we had Instagram too, so why didn't Instagram blow up? Well, because TikTok had such a strong differentiator in terms of what was accepted as the language of regular content on TikTok, much more informal, much more from your bedroom, right? It didn't require going out and being in the world to have a really pretty photo for sharing on Instagram, which is sort of where we were at, I think, at the time of like in 2020. That's sort of where Instagram was still sitting and other social platforms were sitting. TikTok comes on the scene. It's super accessible. It's constant serve. It's really smart at knowing what you like and what you think is funny and fun and interesting. So it's going to keep giving it to you over and over. It was easy to create, and it was the content that was successful on the app was content that you could make at home in your bedroom, in your pajamas. You know, that we saw these things all merge together, and then we saw an explosion in users because of in part because of the start of having more time and more interest in escapism, I think, through the pandemic. And then that stuck around because I'll be the first to say it. I think TikTok is a great product as from a social media management or social media marketing perspective, right? Like it's good for the average user. It's good for brands and businesses. There's all kinds of tools. There's lots of features. It's always changing. It's easy and fun. It is an unlimited serve of content. You really can't run out like you might on other platforms. So all these things came together and caused this boom in TikTok. And that boom had a trickle down effect to everybody, right? The user experience was better for someone who was just opening the app to scroll because there was more content than ever to be served. As a creator, there was more, the platform was gobbling all of that up, right? If you were creating in any specific niche, to Michaela's point, you know, you could be Spencewa, who's just screaming about things that frustrate him, or, you know, Drew, whoever. The more users you've got, the more opportunity your creative content has to be served to the users who care about it, right? So we got to see this really cool, like all boats rise with the tide situation with TikTok. And like any social platform, that's going to level out at some point, right?
Yeah.
It's going to level out. I want to talk about two things here. Primarily, to give, like, I think we get this because we're in social management. And if you're listening and you work in social, this analogy might make sense to you too, but it's worth just like reminding. So if you picture like a big circle, like basically a pie chart in terms of total potential views and engagement on TikTok, right, that are up for grabs, essentially, which is really saying the attention of all of the platform's users that's up for grabs, right? Share of voice almost. When there were less creators, the slices of your pie, the one that you owned, could be much bigger, right? Because not as much competition for those same views. So you're able to own more of that pie, right? So your views probably went up. You probably had stronger engagement, etc. As the creator base especially grew, and as the user base grew, while the potential views and engagement available to a creator technically expands, the more users are on the platform. When there's more creators and more content, and even more low quality content, right? Like the people who are not necessarily trying to grow a platform, but are creating content on the app, throwaway filter videos, stuff that I make, like goofy, dumb videos talking to my like 1,000 followers or whatever. They're all getting uploaded into the ecosystem of TikTok and taking up real estate. And TikTok has to serve all of those pieces of content to somebody, right? So visualizing that pie chart, that pie slice shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And what that looks like is a slowed growth, right? Because it's not every time I post, it's like boom, boom, boom. I'm taking up more of the space on this platform. I'm really growing. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say it makes sense from a tactical standpoint why this is happening. But I think it's especially exacerbated by the fact that the beginnings of the platform had all of the perfect storm to be like explosive
Yes.
growth, right?
Mm.
So the
Yeah.
juxtaposition of typical slowdown versus huge boom, exponential boom is
Yep.
jarring, particularly for creators who found that there was like no friction to growing their audience on TikTok. Like where we are now
Yes.
on TikTok is that like, yeah, there it is. It's a bit of it's more frictiony, right? It's a little harder because you have to
Yeah.
carve out your little pie slice a lot more intentionally and a lot more specifically. What I do know to be true though, at the end of the day is based on my For You page and everyone else's, certain content will still win, right? Certain content will still achieve virality, will still reach a lot of users. Certain creators can blow up still. That's still the case. They're just there are more fish in the pond. So it's a little harder to
Yeah.
do. And it's not going to happen on maybe the first go round from these people
Mm.
necessarily. The other thing I want to say is what we have now on the platform that we did not have in the initial days of the space is platform priorities that they're going to put above the average creator any day, right? TikTok Shop. How many TikTok Shop videos are on everyone's For You page now? Creators are aware of it. They know if I want to be seen and viewed, I got to start playing the game. I'm
Yeah.
going to start sharing products that I like and linking them because as soon as it's got a TikTok Shop feature, it's more, it's not the only priority, but it certainly jumps priority on a video that's just like me talking to my camera, like, not using platform features. So we have all of these new
Yeah.
things in the mix too that are like, yeah, they weren't here 2 years ago, so you weren't competing with the platform itself, TikTok itself, wanting to move around the way that they serve content to
Yeah.
prioritize and benefit the things that make them more successful, which point blank, TikTok Shop makes them money, right? So like, yeah. Makes sense.
That's a really interesting point because some of the points we have here from the article that they attest the growth rate collapse is more ad placements. So like TikTok Shop, ads in general, as well as the general demands of life in precedented times. When we were in unprecedented times, life wasn't so demanding. And so, but to bring all that together and say, yeah, at the end of the day, TikTok's also just going to push their features. And so if you're somebody that's just like doing what you do and not kissing the algorithm and stroking their ego a little bit and giving them what they want you to do, you could see that growth collapse. But then on the other side, like we have with some of our client accounts, we do, you got a new feature, we'll do it. Like we're pick-me's sometimes on accounts. We're like, oh, okay, TikTok. Yeah, what do you need us to do? We'll do that. And it still doesn't give us the pop off what we want. So I think it's like, it just was a different world 2 years ago. And so if you're operating the same way and having the same expectations, it's just unrealistic at this point. And I think, this was a main thing we kept coming back to on our last episode, but I'm going to say it again here. Another reason why you should not pigeonhole yourself to one platform. Okay. If you look at people like Spencois or Drew, they have their own podcasts, which go out on YouTube and they go out on Spotify and they go out on Apple Podcasts. So like they are already building their community in other spaces. I think it's funny. I had experience yesterday. I follow this creator on TikTok. I've followed her for months. Her whole thing is that she's like paying off her credit card debt and she's almost at the end of, like in her bio, she'll update her debt. Like she'll be like, oh, we're only in 5,000. Like yesterday I checked her bio, it says 5,000. And 4 months ago, she was at 36,000. So it's been very fun to watch it dwindle down. And we're about to be the end. And she's like being very transparent. Like, I'm not going to do payday videos anymore. Like once my debt's done, I'm not going to like make videos for you guys when my payday comes around because I won't have debt to pay off. So I won't tell you. I won't have anything to tell you. And so she's kind of preparing her community to be like, all right, guys, like what's going to happen when we're done? I'm going to move back to San Francisco. So like, then we'll have this era, but I'm preparing you. And then she mentioned something about her Instagram. And I was like, oh, I never thought to go see if she was on Instagram. I go over there. The girl has just as many followers as me. And so now I feel like, oh, now we're friends. Like my parasocial relationship has now gotten deeper because I'm on another platform with you where you're a little less popular and you're a little more interactive and show different content. And so there's value when you have users that like just generally like you and the content you're putting out there. They'll follow you. You just got to let them know where you are and don't pigeonhole yourself. God damn it. If there's anything you've learned from this podcast, don't pigeonhole.
And find yourself an owned audience wherever that is, even if it is,
yes,
like a newsletter or like a Slack or like a Discord or like a Patreon or like a like write a Substack newsletter, or like write articles on Medium, or like,
Yes.
I don't know, do
Yes.
anything that just gives you a place to keep your relationship with, even if it's 5 people that you've built a parasocial relationship with on social. If it's important to you, own your audience somewhere. And because this is not going to be the first or last time a platform slows in growth or pops
Mhm.
up and takes a monopoly on the whole industry and like becomes the end all be all platform. And
Yes.
it's not going to be the last time something's maybe going to get banned or blocked or disappear. Like these are, we talk about them like they're shocking news items, I think, because they feel that way in the moment. But the truth is, like, the basis behind them is nothing new. Like, this
Yes.
is the world that we work in, live in, play in, share in, create in, view in.
Yeah.
It's a ever changing. Sometimes those changes feel big, sometimes they don't, but they are all changes nonetheless. So like, if you're uncomfortable in the change, that's totally okay. But we have to build our muscles in terms
Yes.
of knowing how to pivot and flex and take it all in stride. Because and I know we're talking mostly to social media people who work in social when we do this podcast, so like, better than anyone that like it will change. It just will.
Yeah.
Like, if you think it won't, then something's wrong and something has slowed about the space itself. So this is the game we sign up for, man.
It is the game we
Welcome.
sign up for. I think of it almost like real estate. There's an image going around right now of a mansion in California that's built into the side of the cliff leading into the ocean, and like
Oh, the one
it's
that's
landsliding.
crumbling.
Yeah, it's like crumbling in, and like they're posting weekly aerial photos to give you updates on if it's in the ocean yet. And by the way, major props to whoever built that pool, because my God, is that hanging in there? Anyway, all that to say, it's like, yeah, gotta look at it. It's like when that house falls into the ground, I'm concerned, sure, but I can guarantee you that homeowner has another house somewhere. So it's like, if you're, buy houses, don't sell your house right away if it's not performing with the way you want it to. Like, if you have your TikTok and it's not performing the way it used to, and blah blah blah, and you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna delete it and I'm gonna go over here. No, don't sell your house. Just keep it until it falls in the ocean, and then know that you have your other properties to live at if you need to. It's just
Absolutely
like a game
correct.
of Monopoly. But it is a risky one. It's a risky biz, and we signed up for it. So love it or get out. I don't want to hear you complain. You've got options. Just kidding. All we do here is complain about social media.
I was gonna say, you can complain with us if you want.
Yeah, we're a safe space. We love to complain. But yeah, I think that's my 2 cents with that. Is it is what it is. It's a platform at the end of the day. It's not a baby anymore. So just adapt and strategize. It's what we do.
And speaking of being in this industry, I think that's like, if this is the job you work in, that's actually, I think, a transition to our next topic. No?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So the other thing we wanted to talk about today was, I think, something that's really interesting about social, particularly because it's, when we look at it in the grand scheme of things, like, it is a lot younger than a lot of other communications forms or spaces. Like, it's hasn't technically been around nearly as long as advertising in general, marketing in general, communications in general. So I always think it's interesting to hear people's pathways into social media, because you will find, and I'm spoiling our stories a little bit, but you will find that even a few years that separate people can completely change the opportunities and pathways they had into the industry of social media at large. And our team here represents a couple of really interesting stories about how we got into social. But I personally, like, this is one question that, like, when we're at VidCon every year or wherever we are, when we're industry networking, like, this is my number one thing I like to ask people, because it's shocking how very different everyone's story is if they work in social now, how they got here and why. And if they ever meant to be here, all kinds of things. So we thought we would share our individual stories about how we got into social. And then we wanted to hear from you all as well about how you started your social journeys. So I'm kicking it off, but I don't want to go first. So someone else take it away.
I can kick it off, and oh, good, he left. I would say UPS just pulled in the driveway, and I'm nervous he's going to ring the doorbell. I don't know what happens when he comes here.
We can ask him how he got into social media, aka
how'd you
dropping in on our podcast
on social? But he just pulled out, so we're fine. So getting into social, I was working at a consignment shop in high school, and they had a social media, but this was 2010. So they definitely they weren't doing anything with it. They just had one. And I saw an opportunity to, do better. And so I asked, can I do this while I'm here on shift? Can I post about, what we have in the store or whatever? And I started falling in love with it and feeling like, oh, this isn't just posting, this is a system. Like there's things here. And I started seeing that. And then once I practiced and did more of it, I realized like I noticed what other accounts were doing and was like, oh, there's people are doing something intentionally here. They're not just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. And so I got to play with it. And I did that for about 3 years at the store. Um, on my own. I wasn't like taking courses or anything. And again, this is 2010. So like a social media manager isn't like a word you're hearing much at all. It's just like, oh, you do the social for the business. You're the youngest person on the team. Oh, you do that. Um, then I got to college at Temple and kind of went the generic route of communications, again, knowing I liked social media, but there were no classes around that. And so I kind of built my major to fill in everywhere, PR, advertising, kind of did all that. And then every place I found myself, it was my on-campus job at Campus Recreation, then a startup I got to be a part of. I was doing social in everything I was doing. I was a part of Hootathon where we raised money for CHOP, and I was on the social media team. Like I just found that was the place I was always driving to because I loved it. I loved getting the content and turning it around and promoting it and seeing the engagement and then seeing the real life community that's created around what you're doing there. And so I just always found myself gravitating towards those roles. And then I graduated and just kept finding jobs that were related to social media.
Well,
and
and I don't mean to interrupt you, but you also have a unique path of like you have video background, like video editing.
I forgot about that.
And that has to merge with social somewhere. So
I'm glad you said that because that's actually a huge part of the whole thing. The reason I was able to do the social media for the consignment shop is because, yes, I was at school, I was doing video production club and I was in all of our communication classes. And so the video editing aspect already came pretty natural. And I actually thought I was going to go into broadcasting. Like I thought I was going to be a news anchor on the Today Show. And so the storytelling aspect of putting a video together that had like a beginning, middle, and end, and that had a hook, and like that already came naturally to me because of that training. And so when I came to social, I was like, wait, this is that, but it's fun. And I don't have to work at a news station and I don't have to move to the middle of Kansas to work nowhere at a nowhere station. Like, broadcasting was its own world and social was just new. And I was able to apply those same skills that I loved, but in a more fun way that didn't have as much structure as broadcasting. So yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That was a huge part. And then yeah, we kind of, even when I started working with you, Paige, like, yes, this is a social media agency, but I would even say at the beginning, like we offered social management, but we weren't even sure what that was or what that looked like.
And to be clear, we also offered, we were trying to offer social management, but we're getting asked to do all of these extra things on top of it. And we were not saying no. Websites, newsletters, blog writing. So yeah, even then it was a mixed bag, but social always, I think, rises to the top. So
but yeah, it was a very like made up thing. It did not exist. Social media, working in social media was like, if you would have told me that 15 years ago, like when you grow up, you're going to work in social media.
Yeah.
I'd be like, wait, like at the company, like I'm going to work at Facebook. Like, what do you mean? Right? I would have no idea what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. But enough about me. Paige, you're kind of the reason I am in social media. So I feel like you should go last because you're like you're the reason we're all here.
Yeah.
So MK, if you want to kind of fill in where you are.
And I love MK's pathway because it's got like education in it, which is so cool. So
yeah. Okay. So I enrolled in college and chose communication studies because I had a high school teacher pull me aside one day and he was like, I could totally see you like on TV. You love to talk to people, that kind of thing. And I was like, me? I mean, okay, whatever. Like I truly had no idea what I wanted to do. But then I got into college and communication studies. I quickly learned I hated public speaking. Like it was not my jam. But I had a really great advisor who kind of evaluated what my interests were and my skill set and told me about the new social media major that my school had implemented. It was literally like, I think I enrolled in the curriculum in its first year. So it was
And what year was this?
2020.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe 2019. Yeah, probably 2019. So then I started taking social media courses, and a lot of So like it was a combination of marketing, journalism, business, and communications. So like all of that, I got such a great mix, and I loved the social media classes. And then I ended up getting my first internship was with this like women international company. I'm not going to say the name, but I remember just like loving. That was my first time actually ever trying out making posts for another company and seeing really what that looked like. So that process was so fun. It was so fun to like see my post that I created go live. And then I was like, okay, like this is fun. I love this. I want to see where it goes. And then I continued getting internships, continued loving it and enjoying everything. And just, I love the storytelling aspect of social media and just the connection that it allows. And then, so like I got into my first marketing job, where I was doing like radio scripts and billboards and a whole slew of things marketing needs. But I was doing freelance work on the side with Rhea and Paige. And I also had a few other clients that I was doing their socials for. And it wasn't at all what I was doing at my first job. So like it just showed me what I was missing when I was at my first official job. I was like, I want to be in the creative space. And I kept doing it, and you guys offered me a job.
Did you mention the part where we worked together before this? Did I miss that?
Yeah, Raya was one of my internship managers at a yoga studio, and
Many eons
so
ago.
cool. On our first call, I was like, I like her, and I need this. I absolutely need this. And then we kept in contact ever since.
Remember at the end of that internship, you were like, aren't you Italian? And I was like, oh, no, but thanks for thinking that. Very random, but that was my one impression of you as my intern. I was like, she thought I was Italian that whole time.
That's so funny. Yeah, I can.
And now here we are.
Yeah.
Our Miss Content Director.
Yeah.
Not me being on mute when I made a joke about Rhea being Amish, not Italian. But
could stay on mute for that.
Yeah, keep that off the record. Michaela, I wanted to ask you, looking back now, are you surprised you landed in social? Does it make sense that you landed in like what do you think if you were telling like 16-year-old Michaela, do you think she'd be surprised to hear what you do now?
Honestly, not at all. I've always loved content in general. That's number one. And number two, I always was upset. I wasn't allowed to have a MySpace or a Facebook until I was older, which meant that I would still like ask my friends about it. I was always so interested. But what I did have was my YouTube channel, and boy did I create content on there. So that's kind of like where the content creation love sort of started. And I didn't think that that passion would ever lead me into working in social media, but I'm not surprised at all. Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing about all three of us is that we have all had a secret YouTube era. So I feel like one day we'll have to do like our most cringe
festival
previous content. Yeah. I have so many contributions.
I love that.
I don't even know where I would begin. But
my toxic trait is none of them are cringy to me, and I'd watch them all, and I love myself. I love old me, and I love current me, and I love watching all the content I make. I'll show you everything.
That is a strong trait, because when I watch mine back, I'm like, bro, why did you do this? I'm like crazy.
I think I'm at the point where I can watch it now and not be like, ew, dumb, stupid. More, I'm like, where did you get that confidence from to do this? Like, and why don't you have it now, girl? Like, how come you don't turn the camera on today? Like, what are you doing? Obviously, at one point, you weren't even thinking about the implication around sharing. So, like, go for it now. I love that. Michaela, I think it's really cool that you were able to, like, be involved in it from an educational perspective, too, to get, like, you probably got some of the earliest like curriculum elements around social media. Like I would kill to go back to college today to see how they're teaching social. No tea, no shade. I would be curious to see if it's real time, you know, or if it's like on the delay of textbooks, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're talking about like, you know, so anyway, I think that's really interesting.
To your point.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say truly like I had 2 classes that were led by my advisor. She is an absolute gem. that were valuable and very relevant. However, a lot of the other social media specific courses, I had to take like graphical coding classes,
Yeah.
which were so fun. It was an amazing experience, but I quite literally do not need that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun.
I think I'm hearing a theme from listening. I've heard both of your stories multiple times, but I think this is the first time I'm identifying that we all have one common connection. We have many common connections, but one that ties all of our like origin stories in social together, which is in our own ways, each of us had interest in the idea of content online, and getting like making it in some way. Um, that is true of each of us, I think, at different, and that's interesting because it was at different types of content, different stages of the internet and the world at the time. And as you were both speaking, it reminded me of, if I really had to go all the way back, because I candidly will sometimes think to myself, I don't really know how I got here in social. But if I go way, way back, I think the origin of my interest in like the nuts and bolts of what social media is today, like all the tactical stuff that we do, design, editing, photo, writing, etc., whatever. For me, my first, I was bit by the bug around like written content. Which has a lot to do with the time. Kayla, you just said you weren't allowed to have like a MySpace or anything like that. I don't think I technically was either. I remember getting in trouble for having a MySpace back in the day. But I, in my earliest memory of like being chronically online, I loved, I watched a lot of YouTube once it started in like the 2005, 2006 range. But even pre that, I was doing a ton of like microblogging in all of the different capacities. I had a Zynga, I had a live journal. I had, I spent a lot of time on Neopets, like in the written boards, like it, like I'll be the first to admit it. Like, yeah, back in the day, you could do like role play, like, like summer camp role play. And you would like basically write a story with someone else. You know what I mean? Like that was so where my interests lied way back when. And it's interesting to think about that because if I had to zoom out on my like journey through social media, this might surprise people, but like I have always been very, I don't have a great relationship with my self interests. Like if you put me on the spot to be like, what do you like? What do you want to do with your life? Where are you going to be in 5 years? That used to always just put like it's not that I like didn't know, it's that I couldn't see it. I couldn't decide, right? Like I could think of a lot of things maybe, and that really with the wind, like it would change with the day. So when it came to like pursuing a career or pathway, I honestly was so all over the place. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I probably still don't know what I want to do, like if I really think about it. But so like I applied to I messed up on college because I was the first to go to college. I didn't really have an example above me, but like in terms of deciding what type of school, in what environment, what major, I was all over the place. I'm almost certain every single one of my college applications had a different major selected because it was just sort of based on like what program seemed most interesting at that school, which is a crazy way to apply to college, to be clear. Like I know I was in broadcast journalism for some, political science for some, undecided at one because I just was like, I don't know, which is crazy because like it's still me in every one of those cases. It was just like where I would go to school to learn. And ultimately thank God, I landed at Temple, which of all the schools I was applying at had the most majors, the most robust like offering. So like, and thank God it did because I did end up changing my major as soon as I got to school. But I say all that to say, like, I don't think I ever really knew what my career was going to look like. I didn't have like a single passion point that I was like, whatever I do, it's going to be revolving around this thing that I love, like a skill I'm good at or whatever. But long story short, I was originally at Temple a political science major and I really liked the academia of it all. But then I started to get nervous about like, ooh, this is 4 years and then I have to like get a job. And I don't know that like I'm prepared for law school at this moment. So like maybe poli-sci doesn't have a job right at the end of it. So maybe I should find something kind of similar that has more careers because I started to become self-aware. Like, girl, you don't know what you want to do. Like you need to go into a program that has job titles associated with it because you're not going to make decisions on your own. So I truly remember the day that I decided to be a public relations major, but I don't remember how I did it. I remember I was like on Temple's website, like reading major programs, and somehow or another I came across PR and I was like, that's great. Like, I could do this. It's not an anchor on television. It's not a reporter. It's like the go-between, like the person who puts together the story a little bit, who like helps to tell the story. And I think what I really latched onto is I was like, I do like to write. I've done a lot of blogging. At the time I changed my major my freshman year. I had already become a tour guide at Temple, and I was a blogger for Temple, like a student blogger. So I kept my own blog of like my school happenings and things. And so I think I saw PR and I was like, writing, story-ish telling. It is in communications, which I had always had a gravitation towards. I did take like communications like type classes in high school where they were possible, because I knew I liked to talk and I wasn't afraid of public speaking and things like that. So I switched into PR, and I say all this because that was the closest thing to a social media major at the time. There certainly wasn't a social media program. I do remember seeing that there was a social media marketing minor, but it was only available to business students, and that communications was not in the business school. So I was like, well, that's not me, right? So I started to study PR with the idea that I would go into the communications world, but at that point when I switched into PR is pretty much exactly the moment that social started to show up in my just in my life in general. Very similar to Rhea, I was working in admissions as a tour guide. We had big student events, accepted student events that we would host multiple times a year. And there was an opportunity to help with the social strategy for that. We had like an Instagram and a Snapchat as like the admissions team. And for whatever reason, I just felt the pull to say like, I want to help with that. Like, I can take pictures, I can like post. It was such early days of social too, that there was no real like strategy. It was more like, we should have an Instagram because kids have Instagrams. So maybe we could catch them there and get them to come to Temple. You know what I mean? So that was my first like foray into social professionally, is that I was like helping from a admission standpoint. And I actually remember I clearly remember having a conversation with a peer who also was a tour guide at the time. And they were an advertising major and were very involved in social media as like a internship type situation for different organizations. And I remember having a conversation with them and asking a lot of questions like, do you like it? Like, is it, and I remember sitting there thinking like, that sounds cool, but I could never do that as a job. Like, I couldn't do that full time. Very funny now to look back on.
Yeah.
So even then I was like interested in the bug. And I think I also sort of saw that it was like the newest communications thing, like that in PR classes, like every once in a while we talk about Facebook in addition to like, all the other stuff. So though I wasn't convinced that I could do it as a job, I was like, I could do this. And then candidly, I moved away from it once I sort of started to get into my professional career, because I did end up pursuing like a traditional PR track. I did a lot of internships, all in PR, in-house agency, big company, little company, all kinds of different things. And I will come back to the writing thing here, because that was something I was still doing a lot of, was writing, all kinds of writing. And then my first job out of college was a PR agency. And at that agency, I was doing a lot of writing. And this is really where the diversion to social, I think, kind of took off, which is, I've told this story 100 times, but as an agency, we served a lot of clients, and we would have big conversations about strategy around their PR and communications efforts. And anytime social media would start to trickle into the conversation, oh, we're relaunching our brand, we need to make a new Facebook page. Oh, we have this big announcement, we need to share it online. As soon as social would get mentioned, for better or for worse, I was typically the youngest person in the room, and every head in the room would turn to me and sort of look at me like, yes, young person, what do we do with social media? And ironically, I had a very limited understanding of what you should do with social, right? Like, I was like, well, I did the Instagram for admissions one time. Like, I don't know. And the response I would just come up with was, let me think about it. Right. And so because I was being asked all the time, I started to basically teach myself how does social media slot into, at the time, PR and communications. I was trying to understand what is the business organizational value of social media, because what I did know is I knew social as a user, but I even then I understood being a college girl on Instagram is not the same as being a strategic, business or organization on social media. So I just taught myself in action and with the tasks that were being given to me. And similar to Michaela, as I was doing that, I had opportunities to, I started to, first of all, I just really, I was like, I'm into this. I feel like I'm good at it. Like, there's a lot to be gained and learned. I loved how fast it changed at the time. I was like, this is cool. New platforms all the time. And for me, I liked that it was an outlet for written content. So funnily enough, like whereas Rhea was really coming from the video side, you know, like I was really like, well, this is sort of like the new blog, right? Like this is like microblogging at its finest. Um, Long story short, you know, as that skill set grew, I was able to work with other folks outside of my day job. Like I had a friend who was a blogger, becoming a influencer, early age influencer at the time. She was like, I don't know how to do this on Instagram. Like, can you help me? And so I would help her think through how to like have brand partnerships and stuff, even though I didn't know either. You know, we were making it up as we went. All this to say, when the time came around to realize that there were opportunities for me to pursue social media full time, even if that was like full time freelance or contract roles, um, I took the leap. And even then, I just, for everyone's edification, even then, I was not convinced that I would be in social media full time. Like I just was like, I don't, even when I started my freelance career, which became this agency that is all of us, I was like, I guess it's social, but I don't know that it is just social, right? Like I think it's a little more
Right.
PR and communications. Like I wasn't willing to niche down into social right away. The only reason it's called Kylie Social is because I couldn't come up with a snappier, short second part of the name. I didn't want it to be like PR firm, communications agent, like ew. So I was like, social it is, which is I think funny because I think it's like a just wraps us to say I think it's a uh, speak it into existence situation, right? Because I think that then it became clear to me I couldn't do it by myself. I needed help. I needed other big brains, especially brains who occupied other spaces of the social sphere that were not where I came from, right? Like if I'm writing, I don't have a video brain naturally. I knew that right away when I reconnected with Rhea, like that was her magic skill set, right? And I was like, I can't do that. She's amazing. Like someone else needs to do this. And I know my clients could use this and the products we get could use this. All this to say, I never thought I would be here. I never ever thought I would be here. And it just goes to show that you don't have to know where you're going to get where you're going because it will just sort
Yeah.
of fall into place. But the other thing I wanted to just add is from my side, like I didn't have a ton of opportunity to like learn traditional social media in an education environment. And when I did, it was very interesting. It was more like graphic design or like
Yeah.
advertising, like how to paid ads on social. What the heck are those? Because they were like brand new, you know? So all that to say, like I would die to see what a curriculum is like for a social
Hmm.
media major today because I have no
Yeah.
idea. Anyway, long
I
answer.
agree. As you were talking, Paige, I wrote down 3 words that ultimately like why I landed on social media management as the industry that I want to be in and want to do. Because when you were saying about how you applied to like all these different schools and you had different majors, it was like I was in the same boat as you where I didn't know where I was going to land, but like I was the exact opposite and that I thought I knew where I was
Mm-hmm.
going to land. And so for me, I only applied to Temple, early decision. And I was like, well, I'll know if I get in or not. And if I don't get in, I'm not going to college. I'm only going to Temple. It's Temple or bust. And if I go to Temple, I will be doing communications. And if I do communications, I will work at Comcast because I had an aunt that
Mm-hmm.
worked at Comcast. And I was like, I would look at that building every day when we were on campus down Center City. Like, I'm going to work there one day. And I like literally thought that was my plan. And then I applied to Comcast and didn't get a call back. And so I was like, oh shit. And so, but then ultimately what I realized was the 3 words I wrote down was the reason I'm here in this industry and at an agency specifically and not in the Comcast Center and downtown or in another building like that is because of the creativity, the flexibility, and the authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
What we do in social media and specifically at an agency, we have so much room for flexibility and making it work and oh, this isn't working anymore, let's change the strategy, and we don't have to ask stakeholders and get approval by 50 different departments. Like we have the flexibility and the creativity right here to do what we need and what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember just identifying very quickly into my college career that like corporate wasn't going to be for me. I can't sit at an office desk for 8 hours. I can't work for somebody that's going to tell me I can't have visible tattoos. Like I started identifying things about myself that I was like, oh, I need to figure out where I want to be in life that align with my core values. And so this is where I landed. And that's not to say like if you're somebody that's like, I do want to do social media, but I actually need the structure and I love the idea of corporate life,
Mm-hmm.
then great. Go get an internship and explore, try a job, at an in-house social marketing. It's not like social marketing itself is like one thing. But that's the beauty of it. It's like, listen to what you know you like. If you're in college or you're about to go to college, get so many internships. It's not even funny. Like lightly load your course, like do the bare minimum of courses and then load your time with internships. Even if it's not one you're getting credit for, just go get the experience, because you are going to know so quickly into those experiences if it's for you or not, as opposed to graduating, getting yourself delved into a whole job, getting through the interview process, getting your benefits set up, and then realizing you're miserable. Yeah.
It's a perfect transition, because I was going to ask, now, like based on all of our own experiences, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who is aspiring to be in social media, anyone, that could be like a grad, someone getting ready to graduate, or someone wanting to make the leap. Based on your experience in the industry, what would your piece of advice be about working in social?
Just because mine's fresh off the dome. If you're in school or going into school, internships. If you're out of school or that's just not the pathway for you, experience. Go ask a local thrift shop if you can do social for them for free. Go see if you like it. Go do it for free. Go do it for $100 a month. Like, what if you feel like you don't want to charge, just try it out. There are people out there that will take your offers. And it's good practice for you. So just get experience. Just get experience somewhere, see what you like, see what you don't like, and know that everything is very malleable in this industry.
Yeah, like to your point, even if, like, for example, before I started college, I started working at this smoothie shop, and I asked them if I could help with social. And that was just like, they were like, of course. So, like, there are so many opportunities available to you that you don't even know about if you don't seek it out. To definitely try to get as much experience as you can. And also just like start listening to people in the industry, like our podcast, and TikTokers, LinkedIn creators. Just try to explore the space as much as you can and kind of try to envision yourself working in it, and hear what others have to say, because that's going to help too.
Great piece of advice.
Couldn't agree more. That's how I found my feet on the ground in social, for sure. I knew I was like, I know I had good instincts, but listening to other leaders in our industry helped really cement my confidence in knowing that like what I was thinking and saying was like gut instinct was correct. And that made me more willing to put those things into action for projects, for clients in my old job and my current job, whatever. And that makes a huge difference, because once you can speak from your own experience and say, this is what I see in social, like you become so much more confident in your ability to pitch yourself, to think about ways to join conversations, raise your hand in a room and say, hey, I have a thought here. Right. So that's like, so it was a huge part of it for me, was having that like backstop of like knowing that I like checked my gut instinct against other professionals.
Totally.
I think for me, my biggest piece of advice would be, don't lose sight of the fact that social media is an amalgamation of other skills that you probably practice every day, or can practice every day. And having a good sharpened set of like knives in your toolkit for social media management makes the whole thing better, easier, more effective. And those skills are things like writing, research, having an eye towards social content, even when you're scrolling for personal use, as to what works, like looking out for things that trends, techniques that other people are trying. So that it's almost research. It's like cultural research, strategy. So there are times when I still Google like the marketing mix or like basic communication strategy, like theories, because social is new, shiny, and cool, but it is ultimately just one lever in the communications arm. So like there is value in like sharpening your skill set around like remembering like the marketing funnel, like the upside down triangle, like social's at the tippity top of that in the awareness building, you know, top of funnel activity. So like refreshing those skills, tactical stuff like light design, you know, canvas free, jump in, like figure out how to lay something out and like make it look nice, video editing. I want to make clear that like, I think there's a world where you can be a social media manager that doesn't do every little thing, right? We talked about this in a previous episode. You don't have to be a content creator and a strategist and a manager. You don't have to, but to have a base understanding of all of those things, and not even those things, but the skills that make up those elements of this field, it's going to make you better it's also going to give you the clear vision to say, social is not what it was 10 years ago. It's not just like, I want to be in social, so I have to be a full service social media manager and that's it. It'll let you look at the industry now and say, like, of all of the pieces of the puzzle that come together to make up social media as a career, this is the part that I'm most interested in. And that you can absolutely wing it, like just jump in and say yes to opportunities and figure it out. But I think a great privilege of someone who's interested in starting in social now versus when we all may have started in it is that there is more ability to discern than ever, and identify like one piece of it that you're most interested in, if that's something that appeals to you. I wish that would have been the case for me, because I don't think having every little task on my plate as a social media manager freelance was like the least stressful way to do it. It was very stressful. And now I know that there are ways that we as a team and our agency can refine the things that we want to do in social. And it doesn't have to be like jack of all trades, end all be all, do everything for everyone. And so if you're thinking of making the leap now, like highly encourage you to take advantage of the fact that that's the growth of the industry, the maturity of the industry right now. And the best way to figure out which part latches onto you is to sharpen up your toolkit, right? Like to just figure out what lights you up, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel like you're using your skill set. You know, like I like to feel like I matter in work. So like I want to look for things where my skills matter. So I think just like doing those things is going to make it a lot easier and clearer for you to make a leap into social, because you'll be able to see through the goofy titles and social maven, like, okay, but what are you actually doing, right? Like, what do they want you to do, whether it's a client or an in-house position or whatever. So but I'll just end it on this too. Like, there's never a bad time to get into social. If you're someone who's like, oh, I missed the boat, you did not miss the boat. The boat is constantly in motion. And you could just jump on, because, you know, like, the second any of us that currently work in social decide that we don't want to stay on top of things, like, then we just fall out of relevancy. And that's like, it's dog eat dog out there, man. It means that everyone has the opportunity to be good at this, right? So like, you've never missed your opportunity or your time. If you're sitting here thinking like, oh, I should have done this 10 years ago, do it today if you want to do it, but to only do it if you want to do it, right? Like if it matters to you, it's never a bad time.
That's so true. Preach it.
Oh, I love talking about how I like talking about being a grown up. Maybe it's because I'm turning 30 this year, so I'm like, introspective. Let's talk about the past.
This has been Inspiration with Our Elder.
Hilarious.
I love talking about this too, because I don't know. It's another reason why I'm like not even, it's like I'm not embarrassed to go back and watch my content, because I think of all the versions of me that took me to get here. And if I could go back and talk about this with her and be like, oh, and then you're going to get to do this, and you're going to take this skill and you're going to do this. Like, I would just, it just makes me so excited, because like we couldn't have even guessed where we would be, because this didn't exist when we were little. Like, this literally didn't exist. I think I'd like to go back to my generations and generations ago of Amish ancestors and try to explain to them what I do. And they'd be like, the what? What is the internet? So I think it's very exciting, and I would talk about it for days. And that's why we have this podcast. But I hope mainly because we are, we're talking to people that are social media managers or interested in social media management. So we want to know how did you get here? I'm sure everybody has a different story, because this is a very new industry. We've had some listeners sharing stories and submitting things from the past episodes. So we really do enjoy hearing your perspectives. So whatever way, whether you DM us, comment, send us an email, we want to hear your story. And if you want to guest on here and come on and geek out with us, let us know that too. You can guest on our pod. We're currently working on getting our guest list kind of secured for the season. So if that's you holla for Adzala. We'd love to interview you.
I love it.
That's this episode. We'll see you next week for episode 18. Until then, hopefully no platforms go down.